Hello, it's been an interesting week. I've been promoting my free sample pack, DMing people, continuing to do that. So that's been really cool to have those interactions with producers which may be interested, as well as earlier this week, Illmind's platform, Kitsy Audio, or the Kitsy platform, opened. So the eBay for sample pack. So I uploaded my free sample pack on there, and thank you so far to the 7 people which have downloaded it. It's given me a lot of confidence, and it really excited me, because up until this point I've been promoting my sample pack with DMing people, but having people just see the artwork without me getting involved and trying to put my personal touch on things, wanting to give it a go, has been much appreciated. So that's been really good. And last night I started the filming of a podcast series, but actually with other guests. So I interviewed 2 people via Zoom, one an old friend, which I've known since I was a teenager, and somebody else which I've sort of played with as a bassist. And it got me thinking. It was a late night last night, so hopefully it's not too obvious, but I finished recording at 1 in the morning. I went to go leave the studio and my car wouldn't start. So thank you for the company which came out to sort out my car so I could get home. And by the time I got home, I've been up for 24 hours. So I haven't really slept. And so that was the first thing I needed to overcome. And then secondly, first thing in the morning to record the first podcast, my internet cut out. So I needed to book a studio to do it. Modest amount of money, but you know, I'm conscious of where every penny goes in the moment. So it was an inconvenience, but we keep it moving. And between being sleep deprived and doing something else, which I haven't done before, which is starting a podcast with other guests, I wanted to record something about what I'm learning so far. This may be a series as I continue to learn, because this is only 24 hours after recording a couple of episodes. But some people watching may want to do a podcast with guests, and especially as music creators, you know, we get to talk to people in creating in similar worlds and learn things for ourselves, as well as share learnings with listeners. And I wanted to share some of the things that I'm learning so far based on my experience of creating the episodes. The first point is approach and logistics. So with a podcast, you know, you're always thinking of the game of, oh, how can I get the most people to listen, and can I try to shoot my shot and DM some people which have got a big following, and then if they come on my podcast, more people are going to listen, etc. But I didn't want to focus on that. This podcast is focusing on the specific craft of music, and with that I wanted to get content going, because I'm aware that I want to learn as I'm going. And with that, I want to get content out there as opposed to waiting. So everybody that I've approached so far has been just people that I can DM, message or call directly. So with that, even though I know them on the whole, it's making it clear about what they're getting into. So outlining the idea of the podcast very succinctly when I DM them, and having a follow-up call talking a bit more about the reason behind it, and generally just chopping it up about music and just actually saying hello as a mate, as a friend, as opposed to just being a transactional guest. That was really important. And then because of the concept of the podcast, I created a 1-pager outlining the theme. So not necessarily a script, but just some key points that I may bring up just to give them some ideas to think about. And I tried to reassure the guests in that this isn't a very rigid script. If you go off script, I'm not going to try to bring you back. If the conversation goes, the conversation goes wherever it goes. But just to give them a starting point so they're not going into it completely blind. And with that, just kind of describing the format of the podcast as well. I'm really a big fan of long form podcasts. My personal preference, I'm not necessarily into podcasts which are really edited within an inch of their life and all. It feels like a bit of a highlighted, edited show reel. I'm just really interested in eavesdropping in interesting conversations with people that have got a lot to say. So I reassured the people that it's going to be a long form conversation. I'll trim the beginning when we may be talking rubbish and catching up. I'll trim the end so we're not awkwardly staring into the camera and waiting for it to start. But that's how it's going to be. and we were doing it through Zoom, but I said we're doing it through Zoom to interact, but I'm only going to be distributing the audio. So straight away, people knew what they were getting into. They knew how it was going to work, and the logistics was set. So all of that was really with the intention of making them feel at ease and understand about what I was asking them to get involved with. The next part was recording. I can't remember where I read it many years ago, but a term called red light syndrome, where it's, you know, you could be talking, doing something, and then the moment record happens, then you suddenly feel like, oh, I'm being recorded. And I was very, very conscious of that dynamic, because I know these two people that I initially did these first 2 episodes with, but we're not in the same room. I did it over Zoom, and when you're being recorded, it feels different because it's what you're saying is being documented. Of course, I'm going to be distributing it to create awareness of what I'm doing. People are going to be listening to you, judging you, agreeing with you, picking apart what you're saying, all of those insecurities and things we think about when we kind of put out things and in the lovely internet, something which I'm also getting over as well. So with that, how I even set up the recording of just the Zoom invite, we logged on, and pretty much soon after logging on, I pressed record, and I just said that I'm only going to trim once we start the actual podcast. So I wanted to get into a conversation, generally catch up with them, because I wanted to make them feel at ease. They didn't feel like this massive switch to, okay, we're talking, to now Paul's recording. So technically recording straight away and then reassuring people I'll only edit when the podcast officially starts. And then there was something else which I was trying to overcome, red light syndrome, of this fear of being recorded, in that, so this is transferable from my other sort of full-time work in youth work, in that trying to make people feel comfortable and at ease, in that, yes, I know these people, but the situation can feel a bit sort of like strange. So in myself, I was very conscious to be myself and not present a YouTubey person of myself. And even the way that I spoke, in that I wanted to make sure that I was consistent, that I wasn't just talking to them one way when we were generally catching up. And then when the recording happened, I suddenly turned into this media personality. I wanted it to feel seamless. I needed to check myself with my communication style and how I came across to make them feel at ease. I think overall it worked. But then with that, you know, I kind of had my equivalent of red light syndrome as well, because I was the host. I'm the person that's supposed to know what they're doing, and I've never done it before. So with that, it was trying to maintain a level of calmness just to make sure that they felt at ease as well. Being present as the person is talking. I fluctuated between being present and trying to keep a conversation or track, or trying to think of interesting questions. And this was really interesting for me to reflect on, in that even though I said I didn't want to necessarily rigidly stick to the script, there were points where I wanted to highlight particular points because I knew that they could talk really well on a particular subject. So there were times when one of the guests was making a point and I was listening to it and I was really interested in it, but I was in this constant thinking of, I'm interested in what you're saying. I want to target this podcast on music producers. If I was a listener, what questions would I want to ask? So I was thinking of, okay, what would I want to follow up with? And then I was also thinking of, how does this fit into the themes that I put together to keep with the overall aim and purpose of the podcast. So I actually found staying present quite difficult. In face-to-face conversations, I think I'm pretty good at it. But because I was thinking that I want to distribute this and have it as a learning experience for people as it being documented, it was harder than I thought. So I haven't got a solution to how I'm going to overcome that yet, but I was very conscious of that, and it's something to bear in mind, because I think bearing this in mind ultimately dictates the listening experience that the person has that's checking out your podcast. In that, if you're having lots of follow-up questions, it's great because, oh yeah, I'd like to ask that. Or does the conversation flow? Does it stay on purpose? Are they good tangents? Are they bad, distracting tangents? All of those things are important to consider. And I was thinking of all of those things real time. My mind was thinking of lots of different things as the conversations was going on. And that happened with both of those guests. So I know it's a consistent thing with me that I need to work on. As the guest is talking, being aware of the sounds that I'm making. Now, both episodes I really liked because the guest did the majority of the talking, which is what I want. I think they're really interesting, cool people, and they've got a lot of insightful things to say. So I wanted them to talk more. What I was conscious of was making them feel comfortable. So in face-to-face conversation, I do a lot of nodding and do a lot of, positive reinforcement to show that I'm actively listening, going, yes, or yeah, man, I hear that, and things like that. Which the visual reinforcement over Zoom of, say, nodding or in my facial expression showing that I'm interested was good. But there was a point I was recording one particular episode where I noticed I was doing a lot of sort of like in between. And I was thinking, is this helping the person that's speaking? And as somebody listening, is this just going to be distracting of hearing me going, while this guest is making a really insightful point? I'll probably make a clearer judgment on this once I go back into the podcast and do some EQ and compression and listen back to it in full. But thinking about it freshly this morning, it's definitely something that I'm thinking about, as I don't want to be, even though I wasn't interrupting people with questions, I feel like maybe my vocalizations, my and stuff like that could maybe have been a distraction. So I'll see in the edit, but it's my current reflection at the moment. And the ending in that, I hit the end of record, and with that, continue the conversation afterwards, not just saying, I've ended the recording, and then go, oh yeah, great, all the best. I just had a natural conversation with them afterwards about how it felt for them, about how I felt it went, which in both cases I thought was really well. Had a bit of a catch up more generally about music. If they made an particular interesting point, how to talk about it afterwards, because even though I'm capturing the conversation for distribution purposes, in the moment I'm interested because I'm talking about something which I'm invested in, which is music. So yes, it's not recording, but I still want to continue that conversation for my own learning and interest and just respect for that person about their thoughts. So it's just important for me, it started naturally, as in press record, was talking away, then trimmed when the conversation started as a podcast episode, and then continue the conversation after it's recorded to bring it to a natural close so it doesn't feel very cold and cut off, and it feels humane because I know these people, they're not just transactional guests. So I essentially am interested in them, I like them, and I just want to have a conversation with them. And with all of that said and done, going back to the structure side of things, I was thinking of an overall theme of, I wanted this theme of this podcast to be different music creators talking about the impact bass has on their particular craft within music. So that was my starting point as an actual theme to have a through line between all of the episodes. I feel like there was times where it kind of, it touched on that point, and other points it captured other points. But my starting point was I had something in mind specifically that I wanted to capture. And I think that helped structure my thoughts, and it helped the guests think about what they were going into, because of course we're music creators, we could talk about this forever, but a bit of structure I felt just honed the conversation beforehand and gave it a bit of direction. Those are my initial sleep deprived thoughts of creating a podcast with guests. There's more lined up, and I'm looking to create a series before I officially release it through my company imprint, Shakeworks. So not as Pablo Wise, but something else through Shakeworks. So check that out if you've got a moment. At the moment, through Shakeworks, I'm focusing on sample packs, and this is more music related content to support music creators and inspire them to approach their creations in different ways. And I'll be back next time with I'm not too sure what, gearing up to Christmas now, and I want to squeeze in a bit more work before I have a bit of break with family. So we'll see what next week brings, and yeah, thank you for watching again. Take care.